Russia's biggest defense companies are running out of cash. Not rumors, record net losses in their own reports. Russian federal budget deficit is at all-time record high. And by the end of the year, it'll hit 10 trillion ruble mark. It's like a nightmare for Russian state. Corporate income tax collection has declined nationwide. Well, it's landslide, really. Gas shortages at pumps are spreading throughout Russia like wildfire. Currently, there are 20 provinces reporting shortages. The economic train of Russia has finally arrived at the station, and that's the dead end. Welcome to Weekly Economic Update from Russia. The economy is changing so fast that every single week there's plenty to talk about, and this is week 36 in review. If you want a very short summary of this report, all is going to hell. And if you want numbers, figures, and events, then stick around because I have plenty of that for you coming up. Howdy everyone, my name is Konstantin. Welcome to Inside Russia, where usual Russia is explained by the unusual Russian. As usual, you will not find any BS, propaganda, or lies here. Instead, you will find plenty of truth, common sense, and logic. Some emotions too. And I would like to tell you that before I start, I have something to tell you, have something to share you. I was right. Russian economy is collapsing. I am one of the very few economic experts who forecasted the collapse when Russia invaded Ukraine. For the past 3.5 years, I have believed that the victory for Ukraine will come not from the front lines, but from inside Russia. The economy will be shrinking. There will be less pie for Russia's elite clans. There will be fighting for remaining resources more and more, and that will be rocking the boat of the vertical of power. And Putin will fall. His friends will fall along with him, and Russia will descend into chaos. And this is exact scenario is happening, coming into reality now. And it's not just my forecast any longer. It's been confirmed by the officials, by the oligarchs, by the businessmen, by everyone in Russia. For the past 4 weeks, Russia's been buzzing with this word: economic decline, collapse. Quite a few people have said that if you turn into a propaganda, Russian propaganda now, you will be hearing a lot of that. Some of the propaganda personalities even use this word now these days, collapse. The very same word I've been using, and some even criticize me for using the word collapse, saying, oh, it's doom and gloom, but it's not. I have a dedicated live stream coming up just for this topic. I want to show you what is being said now inside the very heart of Russian propaganda about the current state of Russian economy. In a nutshell, from everything's great, we're growing and circumventing the international sanctions that are making us stronger, now it's collapse and basically doom and gloom. Now, that out of my shoulders, let's talk about the analysis, economic analysis, and the review of Russian economy. Well, the economy can be analyzed at 3 main levels, each with own focus and scope. They are individual level, also called microeconomic agents. It studies individuals, households, and businesses. Then there is microeconomy, studies specific sectors of or markets, and macroeconomy. It studies entire national economy. And this is how I structure my weekly economic reports, reviews, updates here at Inside Russia. And I start with microeconomic agents. Basically, it's about what impact changes in the economy have on the lives of regular Russian folks. And I have a few very good examples today. Well, actually, one big topic. I'm often asked what I mean by saying the demise of Russian economy, the collapse of Russian economy. Well, it's pretty simple. When a regular Russian person wakes up, goes to work, but there's no work because consumers don't have any money to spend on anything but utilities and food. And therefore, no one buys products of a company where that person works. When a person is laid off due to lack of work and has no savings to feed the family. When a person gets to a store and there isn't much on the shelves, and food that is on the shelves costs so much so it becomes unaffordable. When a fire breaks out, but the firefighters don't come because the state didn't pay their salaries the previous months, and they just refuse to work, or, they just quit. When a person goes to a bus station, but the bus doesn't come, but there's no money to run bus service any longer. In my picture of the world, that is economic demise. And now I want to show you something that affects lives of different folks, many thousands, hundreds of thousands of folks in the city of Rostov-on-Don, the southern city of Russia where I grew up. This fall, thanks for Rostov residents who use public transportation, buses, because there isn't anything else in Rostov except for buses, or just a few trams, but not significant. So buses are, bus service is turning out to be, how do I say that, not so well. Check this out. Violation established. Authorities report shortages of buses in Suvorovsky part of Rostov-on-Don. Since September 1st, everything has gotten worse. There are fewer buses, and this isn't me saying, or it's not regular folks in Rostov are saying. Rostov authorities admit that now. This is it. Here's the proof. The local media resource called 161.ru, this is what I'm showing you right now. And I look into this media site quite often because it gives a fairly good picture of what's really happening in Rostov-on-Don. Sometimes not the details, but the mood of people and the mood of things. So they're not very optimistic about what's happening. And the authorities, it's so bad, the authorities admit. Now, I wonder why this is happening. Perhaps there isn't much funds for bus repairs and bus operations. And perhaps there aren't enough bus drivers. Perhaps they were mobilized and thrown to the front lines, right? Yes, that's the reason. And that's another confirmation, another proof. Now, more than 1,000 drivers are missing in Rostov. How much do bus drivers get paid in Rostov? Bus drivers in Rostov are paid up to 100,000 rubles a month. That's over $1,000. The city administration told the resource 161.ru. At the same time, the authorities cannot find applicants for this job. There aren't enough drivers. And with them, there is no public transportation. Again, it's not me. It's not regular Rostov folks. It's Rostov authorities admit that. And how bad the situation with the public transportation in Rostov really? Well, how do you measure the situation with public transportation? In minutes. How many minutes do you have to wait for a bus? How many minutes bus is delayed? Well, in Rostov, the situation is pretty darn bad. The buses are disappearing from one of Rostov's longest routes, bus routes. And some folks have to wait for as long as 1 hour. One hour. That's the delay. Hour and 20 minutes, a witness tells. Yesterday, I stood at the bus stop for an hour and 20 minutes waiting for a bus to come. Today, I left even earlier to catch up 7 o'clock bus. Again, it's not there. I waited 55 minutes. Previously, the interval was 20 minutes, then it increased to 40. Now it seems there is no interval at all. The buses stop coming. What was the wait before Putin started the war in Ukraine? 10 minutes? 5 minutes? Well, 10 minutes max. People are getting desperate. It's not going to improve anytime soon, folks. The bloom is off, Russian economy. It was blooming for 2.5 years after the start of the war. It was using the resources of the Russian taxpayers that had been saved up for 2 decades, in 2 decades. Now that bloom is off. Now the money is off. The savings account is dry. Now, if you look at Rostov, you will see people waiting for buses for 1 hour, 20 minutes. Okay? Not gonna get any better. This is just the beginning. And in my eyes, it is the demise. Exactly how it looks like. What do you think, folks? What is demise for you? Do you agree with my definition of demise of Russian economy? Or perhaps it's something else? Well, it's going to be worse in winter. Like I said, it's not getting any better. This is how, I'm asked sometimes, how do you think the Russian people will pay for what Russia is doing in Ukraine? They are paying, and this is exactly what's happening. They are paying. They're picking up the bill, and it's just this bill has many faces, and one of the faces is waiting for a bus in the winter for hour 20 minutes. It's called Russian people have started picking up the bill for Putin waging the war in Ukraine. Now let's move to the markets. Enough with microeconomic agents. Oil and gas revenue. This is the most important topic in the Russian economy. Why? Well, because fossil fuels, oil and gas, natural gas, have been the bread makers of Russia for 50 years. No, not last 5 or 10 or 20, 50 years. They were even feeding the USSR. The most important market for Russia, it still feeds the entire country. Well, not anymore, because the bread makers have been reduced greatly in size. Last week, we have some news on the industry. And the news are not very nice for Russia. They're disturbing. And they came from India. India has been saying a lot lately, oh, we're not going to stop buying Russian oil. We're not going to submit to the USA. USA cannot break India. Well, that's talk. India talks a lot of talk. But now let's see how India walks the walk. India started buying more oil from the United States of America. Indian companies such as Indian Oil, Reliance Industries have been increasing buying American oil of WTI brand. The talk is cheap, Look at what is the walk, how the walk is done. According to the Global Trade Research Initiatives, after Donald Trump imposed 50% trade sanctions on India for buying Russian oil, oil exports from Russia have started falling, and the decrease might amount to 40% or $37 billion by the end of this year. Well, that's $37 billion less for Russia. And that's a pretty big blow, And now some data from inside Russia, from oil companies. Russia's largest oil company, Rosneft, Russian oil, and it's one of the largest oil companies in the world, for that matter. Rosneft profits has just decreased in the first 6 months of 2025 by 68%. In American dollars, the profit of this largest oil producer in Russia, one of the largest in the world, 6 months of 2025, the profit is only $3 billion. The profit has declined tremendously. And it looks like we will see red in Rosneft's books as early as 2026. And let me remind you, current debts of Rosneft amounts to $50 billion US dollars. How about that, huh? Don't you like that data? Other oil companies are not doing any better. The big ones, Tatneft, Lukoil, they all show similar decline in profit. And to add insult to injury, OPEC Plus, that's the cartel of oil-producing countries, increases amount of oil extracted. Well, every couple months lately, they just increased another. They raised the ceiling for the oil to be increased. And there are talks they will increase the ceiling one more time. And then who's behind it? Saudi Arabia. Let me tell you, it's not good for Russia. It's very, very bad. The bread maker, one of the two bread makers, oil and natural gas. So the bread maker oil is shrinking at a very alarming speed. And the next news is, folks, I don't know how to tell you. It's one of those news that is so absurd that I don't even know how to present it. I'm just going to tell you, Turkey now will be getting free natural gas from Russia. Free natural gas. Do you want the numbers? 16 billion cubic meters coming from the Blue Stream pipeline and 6 billion cubic meters coming from a Turkish Stream pipeline. 22 billion cubic meters of free natural gas. Where's the catch? There's no catch. No catch! Free gas for Turkey. They increase the price for Russians every 6 months. They increase the price of natural gas, but they give the Turkish free gas. How about that? So the Turkish are getting it free at the expense of Russian, not just the taxpayers, but Russian people, because that's a huge expense in a family budget for Russians. So why is that so? Well, Russia and Turkey relationship has gone down. Erdogan has playing his own game. Erdogan is getting very strong. Azerbaijan is playing along. It's a part of Erdogan's game, as you know. And there's a conflict between Russia and Azerbaijan right now. Russia started building a nuclear power plant. It's called Akuya. It's a very long-lasting, long-playing project. The construction of nuclear power plants, very long. Basically, the agreement with Turkey was that Rosatom, which is part of the Russian government, Russian nuclear agency, builds Akuya for Russian money, then operates and sells Turkey electricity at the market prices. Well, Turkey froze the construction of Akuya. It's not finished. It's about 80% finished at this point. And Russia is not financing, and Turkey has frozen. So the agreement was made for Russia to supply natural gas, and then all proceedings will stay in Turkey and will be used to pay off to finish the construction of the Turkish nuclear power plant, Akuya. Now, I don't know what to tell you. Free natural gas for Turkey. When I told my mom, she didn't believe me. And then she nearly started crying. Because she receives a pension of 11,500 rubles. That's around $140 or something like that. And she spends 7,000 or 7,500 for the utilities, including for gas. Gas and electricity are the largest items on the bill. Turkish are getting the gas for free now. Now, I don't even want to comment this, okay? Please let me know what you think down below in the comments. I would like to hear what you have to say. Now, what's happening to shortages of gasoline? If you remember, I made shortages that appeared in 4 Russian provinces over the last few weeks. The headliner of my previous Wednesday Russian Economy Week review, I made it the biggest, most significant news. I remind you, 4 provinces experiencing shortages of gas. In some, there are long lines. In some, gas is not sold to people, only sold to to companies, commercial vehicles. And in some, the prices just skyrocket. Crimea introduced rationings. Quotas given to every person by the local government, and special pieces of paper. And the people drive up to a gas station, give those pieces of paper, and get the amount of gas indicated in those pieces of paper, rationings. I saw it in the USSR, never saw it in Russia. Well, as always, for first time for everything. Now it's been 1 week, and I would like to continue reporting this news. 4 provinces last week. How about take a look at this map? 20 provinces now. From 4 to 20 in just 1 month, under 4 weeks. The crisis is spreading like wildfire. Take a very good look at this map. You know, the red is where big problems are. The reports are coming in now. I remind you, there are 84 provinces in Russia. 20 of them are currently experiencing problems with gasoline, one way or another. And this information is coming from a pro-Kremlin newspaper with the roots in the Soviet era, called Izvestia. Those of you who are watching, who were growing up in the Eastern Europe, you might remember that newspaper, Izvestia. The crisis is growing, and I think it's just the beginning. I want to attract your attention to the fact that this is a pro-Kremlin, pro-Putin, pro-war media showing us the troubles. They always sugarcoat, and I think they are even sugarcoating right now. And in reality, the picture is even darker, and most likely there are even more provinces. But they just showing us 20. But the fact that they are admitting the shortages of gas speaks volumes. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Ooh. I'm emotional. I'm sorry. Now, real estate. Oh, real estate is huge. I mean, I don't have to tell you how important real estate for any country. Real estate market. And Russia's largest real estate developer, Samolyot, is in turmoil right now after sudden death, a couple weeks ago, sudden death of heart failure of its 57-year-old healthy billionaire shareholder. Well, you know, his death was a part of the turmoil. It was engineered as a part of company takeover, or, you know, some kind of a hidden plan. We don't know. No one knows, because there's not much known except for this company is on fire and this turmoil. It continues going on right now, and we will see the crash of Samolyot. I'm pretty sure about that. And this is expected. And this week, another large developer, Etalon, opened its books as a stock market requirement. It returned to the stock market. And listen to this. Now, pay attention carefully. First 6 months of 2024, Etalon showed the net loss of 1.5 billion rubles, equivalent of $20 million. Loss of $20 million. In first 6 months of 2025, net loss increased to 9 billion rubles, or $112 million, from 20 to 112. This is another sign that general health of Russian real estate industry is not well, feverish. Etalon is not the largest developer, but it's large enough to make splashes in the market. And other companies, well, they are in a similar boat as Samolyot and Etalon. Will keep my eyes open for that. Metallurgy. Now, one of Russia's bread makers, albeit smaller than the fossil fuels, metallurgy was always success. For 25 previous years, metallurgical companies were among Russia's richest. I know what I'm talking about. I was constructing power plants, gas-fired and coal-fired power plants, for about 15 years. prior to moving to Uzbekistan, and metallurgical companies were our best customers. We used so-called flue gas. Not flue gas. I think in English it's flue gas. The gas that is created as a chemical reaction from the process of steel making, okay? And that gas needs to be cleaned, filtered before released into atmosphere. So instead of doing that, that gas was simply stored, and moved to a nearby power plant, which was literally around the road, to fire the turbine. So metallurgical companies had an incredible amount of electrical production capacity because they had a lot of flue gas. So the flue gas was mixed with natural gas. I built power plants for Novolipetsky Metallurgiский Комбинат, Novolipetsk metallurgical plant, one of Russia's largest metallurgical companies. And customer was Severstal as well. I think that's Russia's largest metallurgical company. And last week, Severstal's CEO Shevelyov said that the current crisis compares to the crisis the industry saw in the early 90s, when the USSR collapsed and there was a turmoil, not just in the economy, but in people's heads, in the entire country, in our lives, okay? In June of 2025, they were 10.2% less steel made than in June 2024. That's the latest data we have. And all signs show us that the industry is not doing well currently. Which is kind of very odd because, look, the war is going on. There are so many planes, there are so many tanks, there are so many helicopters, even drones, bullets, guns, you name it, shells are being produced. Steel is needed. Yet, production of steel falls catastrophically. Why is that so? Severstal CEO Shevelyov also said that the worst case scenario, complete stop of all metallurgical plants. He said that 2 months ago at St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, and then he just said it for the second time. So it's a serious stuff. Man. Wow. Now, a little bit about retail. Russia's largest retailer of consumer electronics, a company called M-Video, that's Russian equivalent of Best Buy, recorded 25 billion ruble or $320 million loss in the first 6 months of 2025. M-Video's debt is 165 billion rubles, or $2 billion roughly. The reason for net loss, people spend less. They have less disposable income and the sales are declining. The margins, the profit margins are also declining. And that's not me saying that, that's M-Video. That's how they explain their losses. And I think they're absolutely right. They're not lying, they're right on. Now, the next industry, agriculture. There's bad situation in agriculture. And actually, I'm making a dedicated video on current state of Russian agriculture. Please tune in. I will release it most likely on Sunday, this coming weekend. So please keep on tuning in. There's too much to talk. This live stream is not enough. But it's definitely interesting. Now, I would like to remind you something. In early July, a very interesting piece of news came from the deputy director of TSMAK, the Center of Macroeconomic Analysis, Dmitry Belousov. Now, SMOC is the government agency responsible for economic analysis, and its deputy director is one of the country's key macroeconomists, a very known and well-respected macroeconomist. Dmitry Belousov is also, well, he happens to be younger brother of Russian Minister of Defense, Andrei Belousov. I remind you, Andrei Belousov, the current Minister of Defense, is not a military guy, never served in the military. He's an economist. He was just made the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation a year and a half ago, and we haven't heard much of him or from him ever since, as if he doesn't exist. So Belousov Jr., his younger brother, the director, gave a very long interview to a Russian media called Business Online Media, where he spoke about the current state of Russian economy. Let me remind you, that's July. He spoke of the forecasts for the future, economic model of Russian Federation, the ruble exchange rate, the federal budget, the key interest rate, the inflation, many other key economic indicators. And this is what he said, I quote, "In the next 10 to 15 years, we will see economic news reports that are more scary than horror films," unquote. I repeat, in the next 10-15 years, we will see economic news reports that are more scary than horror films. Now, what I'm telling you right now, and when I analyze this information, I pick lots of news, I choose the ones I find significant, and there's a picture in my head. And we don't have to wait 10 to 15 years any longer. It's right now, right here. They're like horror films, this news. I couldn't have said better myself. We're seeing it right now. Again, not in 10 years, but in 2 months. In September. Okay. Before I jump into macroeconomy and macroeconomic news, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you again. Thank you for being part of Inside Russia community. Thank you for watching, liking, commenting, interacting. Thank you for coffees you bought me, buymeacoffee.com. Thank you for Patreon, PayPal. I'm demonetized by Google, but I'm not broken. I'm still here, and I give you a promise that every single day I will continue telling you the truth. You have my word on that. Thank you. I forgot something. Before I jump to macroeconomic news, there's one industry that is doing fantastic in Russia. Yeah. Funeral industry. They have many customers these days and lots of work. So they're doing great. Breaking records. Fantastic economic data coming from funeral companies. Now, the third part of the report is macroeconomic indicators, the general health of Russian economy. Now, I'll talk about one thing today. I'll be very brief. I'll talk of the federal budget deficit. The expenses of the federal budget deficit, the expenses of federal budget in the first half of 2025 increased by 18%. And the central bank has been warning that if the rate of expenses continues, then the budget deficit might amount to 10.6 trillion rubles. Now, let me remind you, in January, the deficit of Russian budget was planned for 1.2 billion rubles. Now, the central bank warns that the budget deficit already is 6 trillion rubles, and now it might amount to over 10 trillion rubles. What will happen then? Well, country's budget is also a balance between expenditures and earnings. And what's been happening in Russia? Russia's been earning so much less because it has lost the bread makers. Remember, we already covered it here. Oil, natural gas, the steel, pretty much everything. Russia's been isolated. The sanctions have been slapped onto Russia. And now other countries are being threatened and actually being punished for trading with Russia, like India. Donald Trump placed 50% trade tariff on India for buying Russian oil. So you always balance expenditures and earnings. And Russia's been earning so much less, but it's been spending so much more. And it's a bad combination. It's a huge disbalance. What do you do when that happens? Well, first of all, you need to start earning more. How do you earn? Well, you can borrow money. You can, take money now with a promise to pay later to buy money, so to speak. Well, that's out of the question because Russia's been sanctioned. No one will touch Russian debt outside Russia, where money is plentiful and cheap. Now, inside Russia, no one wants to lend to Russian government because people don't trust Russian government, and for the most part, people don't have money to buy government bonds. Okay. What's the next method? Well, tightening fiscal policies, meaning getting more people out of the taxpayers, increasing taxes. To get more money out of the taxpayers, well, I have some news for you on that. These are two very interesting methods, very unpopular methods, because they both are not working well for the economy. But Russia can't even use these methods to get more money. Okay, the only method it has left is to print money, and it's been doing that in huge quantities. The printing press, although it's not printing physical money, it's printing electronic money. Okay, repo auctions, I've talked about it plenty in the previous live streams. So it's been printing money. But now let's look at the taxes. Vladimir Putin, a few weeks ago, at the St. Petersburg, I believe in the middle of summer, all of a sudden said that a lot of Russians were shocked by his speech. He said that Russia spends too much, and the military-industrial complex and basically military expenditures need to be cut in the future. And a lot of people, a lot of experts saw that as a sign of change of economic policy in Russia. But guess what? Just a couple days ago, this last week, Vladimir Putin at the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok said that Russia will not be decreasing military spendings. And that's another shock to those who believed his words a couple months ago. Okay, but I think he is true this time, and he has no intentions to stop spending more and more on the war in Ukraine and in general on the military-industrial complex. And then he gave an order to the Ministry of Finance of Russian Federation to get more money, to get earnings up. And how do you do that? We don't know. Well, taxes, right? The only way is left is taxes, well, besides printing money. Guess what? Corporate tax collection in June decreased by 21% compared to June 2024. And we just received this data for June. And that's despite the fact that corporate income tax was increased by 5% from 20% to 25% for all companies on January 1st. higher taxes, but less taxes collected. And decrease in tax collection is a trend now, because in May of this year, Russian Internal Revenue Service collected 16% less taxes than in May of 2024. So nothing is working to increase revenues for the budget. The only way left is to print money more, because even with the current rate of printing money, they are getting short by 10 trillion rubles. That is a catastrophe. That is the demise. Now, I would like to have this most significant news of the week, largest, the most important news right now at the end of this message. Now, as you know, Russian economy consists of two parts now. One part is the military economy, I call it the war economy. Another part is the civil economy. What used to be economy of Russia, now it's just one part, civil economy. The military industrial complex and the rest of us. And Russia did show some economic growth for a couple years for one simple reason. It took the reserves, the savings account, and used it to flood the military industrial complex with money. It ordered more tanks, more missiles, more planes. It started getting more people to work in the military industrial complex, paying them more, so they were paying higher taxes, and they were spending more buying everything, vacations, eating out, consumer electronics, things like that. And that was the driver of Russian economy. It was also driving the inflation up, but it was driving the numbers up. Now, most of data of the military industrial complex enterprises has been classified. Oh, obviously, the war is going on, right? All we know that the military industrial complex has been doing fantastic. Well, in times of the war, it makes sense. We didn't know much of all that classified data until now. Now, some of the companies of the military industrial complex start stepping forward and releasing information. But they're doing it in a very unusual way. They're getting bankrupt. I'll start with Rocket and Space Corporation Energia. I mentioned briefly in my previous reports. It's confirmed now, it's in trouble. It was founded by Sergei Korolev, and it is one of the leading Russian enterprises in the space industry. Well, it's basically Russian NASA. Okay? Energia has just announced its collapse. Igor Maltsev, the head of Energia Corporation, describes the situation in the company as critical. I quote, multi-million-dollar debts, interest on loans are eating up the budget. Many processes are ineffective. Significant part of the team has lost motivation and a sense of shared responsibility. I unquote. Maltsev urged publicly, openly, to stop lying to ourselves and others about the state of affairs, convincing ourselves and others that everything is fine with us. He did not rule out the possibility of complete closing of the corporation, being unable to function properly, pay wages, let alone create products. What a sad story. NPO Energia, it's like, there are two space agencies in the world always competing, but driving the progress. First, American NASA and Russian Roscosmos. And Roscosmos, the base of it is NPO Energia. That is Roscosmos, okay? That all the plants, all the companies tied in together who were actually producing space rockets and the components, okay? No more. Another company, Angstrom, the microchip manufacturer, and the microchips are used in the military production. I don't know exactly in which products, but all I know is military. In everything that flies, Angstrom showed profit decline. It still is in red, in black, but check out the numbers. The profit declined by I'm sorry, I fact checked. It's true. Okay. 1,100% from first 6 months of 2024 to 2025 compared to 25. So now in 25, half of the year, 23 million rubles or $287,000. That's the profit. Guess how much its debt is? 238 billion rubles or $3 billion. The company that produces microchips to drones, to planes, to, everything, that has so many orders for years to come. That's at 100 of its capacity, production capacity, shows a reduction of profit by 1,100%. A company with $287,000 profit has debt of $3 billion. Well, who is the creditor of this company? Of course, Web, Russia's largest state-owned bank that finances, basically gives money to military-industrial complex companies. The company is going to go under. There's no question about it. What will Web have to do about that? How Web will take the liquidation, the loss of $3 billion, because that debt will not be collected? It's a good question. Now, the next company is Russian Helicopters, located in Rostov-on-Don. Вертолеты России, the manufacturer. Well, actually, you know what? The Вертолеты. No. Don't let me mislead you. Вертолеты России is a large corporation that unites all helicopter manufacturers. In Rostov, they just manufacture Mi-8 helicopters, okay? So Russian Helicopters is a huge giant. So Russian Helicopters reported billions of dollars in losses. In the first half of 2025, the Вертолеты России holding company received 2.5 billion rubles of net loss. That's $31 million equivalent against 5.5 billion rubles or $65 million profit previous year. From profit to loss. And the revenue of the entire group of companies decreased by 25% to 9.1 billion rubles. Now, helicopters, military helicopters, attack helicopters in times of war. And the company that has been flooded with money and with orders is losing money and nearing bankruptcy. This is not a joke. This is Russia. Another company that now manufactures planes, Yakovlev. The net loss of Yakovlev in the first half of 2025 amounted to 4 billion rubles, $50 million. Whereas a year earlier, the company showed a loss of 443 million rubles. That is, the loss increased 9.2 times. We kind of this trend shows us the direction that Yakovlev is going to. That's a dead end. The amount of revenue, cost of sales, and other information in the report is not disclosed according to the requirements of the legislation of Russian Federation. It's been classified. The only number they give out that it works at a huge loss. Yakovlev is a member of the United Avia Corporation, unites several enterprises, including production centers in Komsomolsk-na-Amur, Irkutsk aviation plant, Aero campsite, Rapart, Rata companies. The company produces Yak-152 training aircraft, as well as other aircraft, including military ones. Folks, these aren't small companies. They're giants. They are the foundation, the cornerstones of the military-industrial complex. They all have steady contract flow and lots of financing. They basically command money. They don't go to... They just tell the government how much they need and they receive it. Yet, they have been seen red in their books. Now, I'm not going to give you too much analysis of why it is happening. To me, it's obvious that the companies in Russia that are controlled by the government and under influence of the government, they're not aimed at effectiveness, at producing great products. They're aimed at being vehicles for stealing taxpayers' money. How else can we explain that these giants with so much money, with so much resources, with so many orders going under? Because the money has been stolen. Now, this is the most important question everyone is asking me right now. Offline, online, not just on YouTube, but in real life as well. For how long Putin will be able to continue the war in Ukraine? Russian economy declines more and more every single week. So for how long? Friends, I'm sorry to disappoint you. There is no answer. I am an expert on Russia's economic transformation that's been taking place for the last 3.5 years. I have recently forecasted, I've been forecasting most economic outcomes of Putin's decision to attack Ukraine. But there are too many crossroads, too many possibilities, too many ifs. Just a few examples. What if Donald Trump hits Russia with harsher economic sanctions? That's one road. What if Donald Trump helps Russia by providing some sort of economic support, allowing American companies come back to Russia and work developing Russian resources? That's another road. What if India stops buying Russian oil? What if it continues to buy Russian oil? What if some sanctions are lifted? Or what if more sanctions are slapped onto Russia? So many ifs. And we don't know how long in this mode Russian economy will go. We know that Russian people will be paying for the decisions of Vladimir Putin and his friends. Despite I cannot tell you how long Russian economy will last to support the war in Ukraine. There's something I can tell you with surgical precision. regardless of the circumstances, of future of Russian people is being wiped out now. They are the ones who sacrifice their own well-being, their own and their children. They are picking up the war bill right now, paying for and bailing out the war machine Vladimir Putin has built. And they're being used to enrich Putin's friends. I put my reputation online here, mark my words. It will not end well for Russian people. The point of no return is way behind them now. The die was cast and the Rubicon was crossed quite some time ago. The Titanic is fully submerged, underwater and sinking fast. Thank you for watching. Carthago delenda est.